Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So again, if you're coming in, just go into the chat and tell us where you're coming from. And I want to welcome you today. My name is Marcia Nedland. I'm one of the organizers of the Middle Neighborhoods Community of Practice. And today our topic is the secrets of new market tax credits in middle neighborhoods, which is kind of a secret. Not enough people use them, I think. So first we want to do a quick poll though and see what sector you're coming from, where it's been really interesting for us to track whether the extent to which people are coming from. Our two primary audiences are nonprofits and local governments. But we always like to know who else is here and what topics attract different groups. So let's see. Still coming in. Okay, we got 20 people who haven't checked the poll. Of course, I'm probably one of them. Okay, well, I think people are done responding. Are we sharing the results, Anne, or can everyone watch this there we go. So again, 50% nonprofits, that's not surprising. 23% local government, excellent. We're really trying to grow our local government audience for the record, so please invite your colleagues. One of the things that we realize about middle neighborhoods is that many of them don't have a nonprofit serving them. And so they may have a strong neighborhood association, but they're most likely, like technical assistance provider might actually be local city government. So we're trying to develop more relationships and lines of communication there. State government, federal, and we have some consultants. Okay. Do we need to scroll down to see the rest of that, Anne, or is that, oh, there we go. Realtor, financial institution. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. So I'm just going to open up with just a couple of points about the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative and what a middle neighborhood is before I introduce our panelists. Middle Neighborhoods Initiative is a national initiative, and it's basically just focused on mobilizing attention on middle neighborhoods, which are often kind of ignored or not paid close attention to because they are neither the most distressed nor are they the healthiest in a community. And we have noticed over and over again through, hands-on sort of personal experience and from research that they are declining in number. They're starting to disappear either through unchecked decline, sort of very gradual, or through gentrification. Because we feel like they are the mixed income, quality neighborhoods where many first-time homebuyers buy their first homes. We really think that they're an asset to this nation that's worth preserving and is much less expensive to preserve than to, completely correct should they decline more or should they gentrify out. So we have a community of practice that's what we're doing today. One of the things we're doing today, where we just try to connect people who are doing this kind of work or interested in it. We primarily do that through webinars, newsletters, best practice case studies, but we're always willing to take your email, customize a webinar for you, for your local leadership, or connect you to other peers across the country who may be dealing with an issue that you're doing or trying a strategy you're trying. We also do research. Our partners are two organizations that share this initiative are NeighborWorks America and the National Community Stabilization Trust. The trust does the policy analysis and advocacy, and NeighborWorks America supports the community practice. So again, middle neighborhoods don't have a hard and fast set of metrics to define them, but if you think about your own community, it's either the neighborhoods that are they are neither the most distressed nor are they the healthiest. They tend to have been built originally as mostly single family homes in an era when families with children were probably the biggest demographic that was being built for. They tend to have still more than 50% owner occupancy, although in some places that may be slowly eroding. The housing stock tends to be aging, but still in decent condition. And the issue more often is that it hasn't been updated in a long time to appeal to today's home buyers. One of the things that I think is really makes middle neighborhoods worth preserving is that they are the neighborhoods that are more racially, ethnically, and economically diverse than either their higher income or lower income counterparts. There kind of are those neighborhoods that we're constantly trying to create when we talk about mixed income strategies. I just want to call your attention to a mapping tool that we have at the website. There is a direct website that you can see up there, but you can also go to ncst.org/middle neighborhoods and get to this tool. And it's just a beginning way to use only income which is only one factor in toggling around at different income tests to see where the census tracts are in your MSA that meet those income tests to sort of maybe start a discussion on where your middle neighborhoods are if you don't know already. Okay, so today we have just a killer set of panelists full of experience. And we're going to kick off with Donna Aronoff-Smith, who's the Executive VP at Smith NMTC Associates in St. Louis. Donna is part of a consulting legal firm that does the very technical work to support many new market tax credit projects around the country. She and her firm have worked, I think, with most, if not all, of the organizations in the NeighborWorks network, for example, who are using new market tax credits. And both of our other panelists are represent organizations that she has worked with as well. So she's going to sort of set the table for us, give us the overview, and help us understand what new market tax credits are and how they work. And then we have Donna Van Ness, who's the president of Housing Channel, which is a nonprofit in Fort Worth, Texas. And Donna has done, I think, a couple of new market tax credit projects alongside many other strategies. And she will just describe how she did that and sort of what her income guidelines were, what the structure of her construction was, the setup. So it'll be one look at a way to do it. And then Jeff Hasser will join us from Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. And they've done a couple of projects as well. And interestingly, they've done both scattered site, some rehab and some new construction, and more of a one project built all together. So there's so many different ways that you can do new market tax credits to create homeownership opportunities. It's really an exciting resource. So let's get started with Donna. We're going to do all of the presentations, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. But I do want to let you know that as we go along, if you'd like to type in any question that comes up in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, that would be great. And that way we can come back to them at the end and capture them all. So now we can go to Donna. Donna has been really very patient and generous person to the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative, because she's had multiple conversations with me, sort of educating me about new market tax credits and helping me think through what would be the right combination of panelists and so forth for our audience. So Donna, thank you so much for all of your help on that, and take it away.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll just get started. So just very basic, New Markets Tax Credit Program was developed, or Congress authorized it, as the Community Renewal and Tax Relief Act of 2000. The purpose is to incentivize sustained private investment in economically distressed communities, and the private investment piece comes in because they get a federal tax credit. The Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, which I think most of you probably have some experience with the CDFI fund and one of their several programs, which is under the IRS and under the U.S. Department of Treasury, is the organization or agency that manages the program. basically they're allocating federal tax credits to what are called certified CDEs or community development entities. And those are basically CDFIs or lenders who are lending in these distressed communities. Examples are Community Housing Capital from NeighborWorks America, the Housing Partnership Network, and I mentioned them because those are the two that we manage. And they receive the tax credit allocation through a pretty competitive annual application process. Next, thanks. So some of the things that I think as an organization who would be potentially interested in applying for New Markets Tax Credits allocation, applying to CDEs for it, are timing, right? So the New Markets Tax Credit allocation application and award cycle is a little funky. It changes a bit year to year, as government programs often do, but this is sort of a ballpark guideline that's been consistent the past few years. In the summer of, well, now we have to update this slide. In the summer of 2024, we would go to the folks who have previously given our CDEs, like Community Housing Capital, for example, projects to put in their New Markets Tax Credit application to the fund. We would ask for updates on those, and then we would also ask for new projects to be included. We then go through a process internally where we score those projects, pick sort of the cream of the crop, which are often just the ones that have the most information for us at the time. And those are our priority pipeline projects that we talk about in a fair amount of detail in the application. But the rest of the projects are also critically important because we need to show the fund that we have a lot of demand for that allocation we're requesting. Then by the fall, in this case, it's going to be of 2025, there would be an award announcement. It usually falls 8 to 10 months after you actually submit your application that you hear about the awards. Once the CDEs find out how much of an award they got, it's never going to be the full amount they've asked for, so they're going to have to make tough choices. They're going to make a selection, and then they're going to start working on a closing process. Soon after that, usually within a month after the award announcements, the CDFI fund releases the following years. So in this case, it would actually be like the 2025 New Markets Tax Credit allocation application, and announces the deadline. The deadline is usually 8-ish weeks out from when the applications first come out. And then in early of the following year, 2025, those applications will be due and will be submitted. At the same time, there's going to be a deadline for those CDEs to have deployed at least 25% of the allocation they received from that prior award that was just announced. And it's going to be a fairly tight deadline. So they're going to want projects that are ready to roll at that point. So technically, you're talking to CDEs. Let's do it for this year. So for the 2024 application, CDEs are going to start reaching out in June, July to learn about your projects. Then an award announcement is going to come out for the 2023 application in September or October of this year. The actual application for the 2024 application is going to probably drop around October, November of this year, and then be due either December of this year or January of next year. At which point in the first quarter of next year, the CDEs who received allocation are going to be wanting to close at least part of the allocation they just received. Next slide.
So Donna, if I may just clarify, so basically the Treasury Department through its CDFI fund allocates tax credits to these CDEs, which then act sort of as what we might think of as intermediaries. They get big chunks of them, and then they entertain smaller proposals for individual projects.
They're not, okay, so forget anything you knew about LIHTC is, I guess, the first thing I would say. Because I hear a lot of LIHTC language in what you're saying. Yes and no. The CDEs get the allocation of tax credits. They deploy them in a loan through a semi-complex, not too complex, but semi-complex structure that is created basically for each transaction with some entities created for it as well. And then that CDE manages what comes down as a loan, but a portion of it is forgiven, basically.
But
For
the
7
intermediary
years.
thing
They're
is
not an intermediary. They're doing a lot of work for the 7
Yeah.
years. They were basically like the lender, but
they're
they're
on the hook
managing
for all
for
of
the
it.
investor.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a little, it's a deeper relationship, I guess is what I would say.
But yeah, but I guess one thing that sort of has become clear to me is that if I am a nonprofit or local government that wants to do a new market tax credit project, I'm probably not going to be applying directly to Treasury.
You will not. That's a really good point, Marcia. Correct. You will be applying to CDEs who have done the hard work of applying to Treasury to get that allocation of credits. Yes. And then just for some historical background, since we created the model to use new markets for affordable for sale housing in like 2007. And since 2008, we've closed 622 million
Wow.
worth of transactions, 139 homeownership projects, over 5,500 homes in 32 states plus DC. And we've worked with 18 different CDEs. And when I say that, that's because we've got some, like I said before, that we manage and collaborate with on everything, including writing applications. And then we have some that we represent nonprofit organizations who are looking for allocation. And we connect with the CDE, source them, and then do the same thing we do for our CDEs that we manage to a point, not as far, obviously. And we do the same that we do for those nonprofit developers throughout. Next. So here's sort of key points you have to think about for your project to figure out if it's a new markets project. One, is it in a new markets tax credit qualified census tract, which means that the area median income is 80% or below, or the poverty rate is 20% or higher? And that is a threshold qualified census tract requirement. The only other way you can meet the qualified census tract is something called targeted populations, where let's say the poverty level doesn't meet it, the area median income is somewhere between 80% and 120%, but you are going to serve let's put it this way, at least 60% of the revenue you receive from the sale of the homes is going to come from sale of homes to low-income persons. If you're willing to meet that criteria and able to, you could qualify under that targeted populations. You need to be able to spend the full new markets tax credit funds you receive, which is basically going to be what the allocation amount you receive is minus the CDE fee, minus expenses ongoing and at closing that will come out, be taken out and reserved upfront. You need to be able to spend those on the project in 18 months. It doesn't mean you have to complete the project or sell the homes within 18 months. It means you have to spend those funds within 18 months. You have to commit to sell at least 20% of the homes built affordably to low-income buyers, meaning 80% AMI or below. Affordably means that either their debt to income ratio has to meet FHFA debt to income ratio at the requirements at the time, or if you say you're not serving as the lender and you don't know what the DTI is for your buyers, then the home sale price has to be 95% of the median purchase price or below. Presentations will be circulated, Lindsay, at the end. I happen to see the chat come up. If your total development cost just for your project, not adding on new markets tax credit expenses and other things, but basically the total development cost, you want to be 3.5 million or more generally. If it's lower than that, we will always run numbers for anyone and confirm what it looks like, but if they're lower than that, it's may not be worth your while and the headache you will go through to use New Markets tax credits. The next piece of it is, and at the end of this presentation is an actual model or diagram of the structure that we use to deploy the funds. I'm not going to go through it, but it will be in the packet if you want it. And I say that because it might be helpful for you when I talk about the leverage funds. So you have to build a capital stack in order to have the funds that will funnel through the New Markets tax credit structure. And of that portion, roughly 2/3 of it, you, the nonprofit developer, is bringing to the table. You are bringing those funds to the table, and you can do it one of three ways, or a combination of these. If you have pre-incurred costs, so you've been already spending money, say on infrastructure or other things, purchase of the property, etc., you can monetize the value of those through basically a day loan that you receive from usually the investor. And you can, as long as those expenses were incurred no more than 24 months prior to the New Markets tax credit closing, you can utilize that portion as part of your leverage that you're bringing to the table. Obviously, if you're cash on hand, you can always use that. And then the last way is getting a source loan outside of the structure, depending on who the CDE is. For example, if it's a CDFI like HPN is or CHC, oftentimes you can get a source loan from them. If you have a relationship with a local lender, there are nonprofit funds sometimes available. There's all sorts of things. You can even use like a nonprofit or foundation to guarantee a loan from, your local lender that might get you a better rate or things like that as well. You're going to bring that 2/3 to the table. So just again, this is ballpark figures, and they depend on the pricing for the credits at the time because they're taken over 7 years by the investor, so you don't get dollar for dollar for the credits. And we've seen the pricing as low as 65 cents and as high as about 88 cents. Right now, it looks like we're at about 80 cents, 78 to 80 cents. COVID definitely dinged those, the credit price, unfortunately. So you're going to bring the leverage funds to the table. The last thing we need you to do is to build and make best efforts to sell one home per year in a qualified census tract for the full 7-year compliance period. So what that means is once you've spent those New Markets tax credit proceeds on your project, you're going to have to build a home a year that will run through your borrower structure for the 7-year compliance period. And the reason we mention this is because those of you who are in it's common practice, you build homes all day long, there's no reason you would not have at least one home per year that you would be developing, and you could therefore run through that structure. But for some folks, if this is sort of a new thing, they're getting back into home ownership development or something, you need to think about this because it is a compliance requirement. And lastly, you cannot use it for residential rental, only for sale. Lots of flexibility. You can do new construction, ag rehab, single family, multifamily, condos, duplexes. You can read this, townhomes, co-ops, ADUs. Mixed income developments are permissible, and it sounds like from what Marcia was saying would be very good in this, for middle neighborhood type neighborhoods. Land trust, shared equity models work as well. Pretty much anything you can think of, as long as you're not developing a tanning booth or a bar in your home or renting it out, you can use New Markets for it. Next, yep. So one thing to keep in mind, because in reality, this is why you're doing it. It's this net benefit that is important to you as the developer. And that is the portion of the tax credit equity, which, if you remember, is around 1/3 of the total. So if you've got a $10 million allocation, if you take a CDE fee off of it, let's say you're at 9.75 million. And the tax credit equity that came in will vary depending on the pricing, right? But let's say it's coming in at around, out of that 10, say just 3 million. It's going to be a little under, but let's just say it's 3 million. There's a portion of that that you're not going to have to pay back. You receive all of it, the full amount at the closing, and you're going to use that to do your development. But at the end of the day, there's going to be this portion left over. It usually translates, this is not a mathematical formula, just from experience, it's usually somewhere between 21 to 28% of that leverage amount, that 2/3 of the total that you are bringing to the table. So if you're bringing 7 million, somewhere between 21 to 28% of that is going to be the amount of tax credit equity minus all the costs and expenses, both closing costs and the ongoing accounting and compliance costs. And at the end of the day, that net benefit, you are not going to pay back. And in the meantime, you will have already paid back your source loan through the sale of the homes over the 7-year, hopefully less than 7 years period that you would sell the homes. But you'll be selling that back outside of the structure. So we collapse the structure in on itself, and basically you walk away keeping the net benefit, so it stays in the project. Next. So the net benefit and the Kulicki proceeds, let me just say what those are for a minute. The Kulicki proceeds, there's lots of acronyms in Newmarket that's kind of ridiculous, but it is what it is. That's Qualified Low-Income Community Investment Loan. And that is what I talk about when I say your Newmarket's tax credit funds or your loan, because for 7 years, it's going to quack like a loan, and it has to. Even though everyone knows that there's a put call option, it's going to be forgiven. And historically, we've never seen it not forgiven. You still have to go through the process, right? So these proceeds can be used pretty much for any development costs you can think of. Pre-development, those pre-incurred costs we talked about, and the advantage of having the pre-incurred costs is on both sides of the table, because those will count as have already been expended. So it's going to reduce the amount you have to spend in the compliance piece, but it also helps lower how much cash you have to bring to the table. So it's going to lower the cost of those other proceeds that you have to bring to the table, because your source loan will be smaller. You can use it to acquire the property, hard and soft costs of construction, and you can take a developer fee up to 10% of your project costs. On the other piece of it, that that significant net benefit we're talking about, you can use it for whatever needs you have for that particular project. So if you really just want to scale production because there's such a need and you can do that in the environment you're in, do it. A lot of developers that we've worked with will also sort of use some of it to be able to hire smaller contractors who, as we all know, can be more expensive because they don't qualify for bonding, etc. So they'll hire MBE, smaller contractors, help them gradually increase their capacity, which is another economic development tool. So they get bigger and they are then able to do larger projects. You can address market gaps in the community if and we see this everywhere nowadays, but on the coasts probably especially. It can cost them $600,000 to purchase property, build a home, and they can sell it for $250,000. So there's a huge gap to fill. And then you can also subsidize affordability gaps for your low to moderate income buyers. So for example, and I'm sure Donna Van Ness will talk about this later, but you can use that combined with maybe some of the home sale proceeds from market rate buyers if you're doing mixed income, to help you actually provide the subsidy you need for those lower income buyers. Next. Thanks. There are some compliance and reporting requirements, and I'm sure Donna and Jeff will touch on that as well, that you do have to do. Some of them have to do with remaining, you know, a qualified, active, low-income community business or qualified B. So we talked about a lot, spend the Kulicki loan proceeds in 18 months, developing the one home per year to remain an active business, and selling at least 20% to low-income persons affordably. It could be more than that. It depends on the loan agreement and what you've committed to, but it's going to be at least 20% just for plain old compliance. Some of these, like the active business, one home per year, sounds like maybe, well, of course I develop all year. I always do that. But part of why we pull this out is because for the structure we created, we use something called a portion of the business model. And what that basically means is that that borrower is a portion of the business of you, the nonprofit developer. So it's not a separate legal entity. It's basically a separate accounting entity. It's a set of books and two bank accounts in reality is what it is. And so that portion of the business, or POB, has to do monthly spend reports for until they have spent their full Kulicki or loan amount. And it's basically providing us 15 days after the month end with complete documentation on what you've spent that month by address. Typical things you would do if you were being dispersed or whatever, you know, like there's a spreadsheet that goes with it, and then you're going to have invoices and proof of payment that line up, designated by the address. Separate books and records for that POB entity. That POB cannot have employees, but it's basically in effect using you all, like the mothership, so to speak, using your employees. The loan, this is something to keep in mind for you as well. That loan is reflected on your books. So if it's like I said, 9.75 million, say if it's a $9.75 million loan, that will be on your books for 7 years, but so will your ownership in the leveraged lender as an asset. So in reality, it's that tax credit equity amount, basically that is the lug on your books for 7 years, but it is there. We do have notes that we've worked on with the accounting firm that we use for these transactions to help sort of explain it. We also work with your auditors to make sure things are clear if they are at all confused. And then lastly, because it is structured as a loan, there is semi-annual loan servicing, but the way the loan servicing works is that you make your loan payment, and it's under 1% interest, and you're making an interest-only payment for the 7 years before we collapse the structure for you. So you make your interest payment up to this sub-CDE. It then makes a distribution up to its owner, which is an investment fund owned by the investor. That investment fund has borrowed money from a leveraged lender entity, which you and the other nonprofits in your particular closing own. That leveraged lender then makes a distribution to its owners, you and your fellow nonprofits, which equals 99.99% of the amount that you paid in interest. So you get it back within 48 hours minus 0.01%, but we have to go through the process. And then reporting requirements. Thanks, sorry, and I'm wordy. There's compliance reports for the CDE that are basically impact reporting and what did you do with the money type of things. And then you have to provide your audits, financials, and tax returns on a semi-annual usually basis. Obviously not the audits or tax returns, but the financials. Okay. Just to think about whether your project is ready, there's really two parts of being ready. Like one is, are you ready to provide a project to us as we're writing an application? That's obviously not as high a level of ready as if we're going to fund you. So you have to own the land or have purchase plans in place. If it's scattered site, identify the area and have a track record of doing scattered site or working in that neighborhood. And enough details just so we have something to talk about in the allocation application. Ready for allocation award funding, obviously a higher standard. You have to own the land, have it under contract or the equivalent. For purposes of the closing, the land cannot be collateral for some other debt that you might have at the closing. If it's scattered site, obviously you're not gonna own all the land, but you're gonna have it identified, you're gonna have acquisition plans in place, and again, we're gonna wanna see that track record. And then a big one is you're gonna have to have those leverage funds either raised or a very clear plan in place. We work with you and talk to the lenders and explain to them how it works, because the collateral package for those source loans is a little unique. But you've got to have a pretty clear plan for that. Here's what CDEs are looking for. So there's the eligibility requirements, which we talked about. Qualified census tractor meets targeted populations, at least 20% sold to lower income buyers affordably. Shovel ready, which includes leverage in place, no residential rental. And then we look at the size and the cost to make sure that it's really worth your while. Desirable characteristics, though, I would say that at this point, that top one is almost a requirement. The CDFI fund in the past few years has made it a requirement that CDEs deploy 85%, at least 85% of their allocation to projects that qualify as being in areas of higher distress, which means that almost every CDE requires almost every project to be in an area of higher distress. And it's higher poverty, like 30% or above, lower median income, 60% or below, unemployment at 1.5 times the national average. If you're doing targeted populations, or you can do it, that can meet it. And then there are certain other specific criteria that require 2 of the criteria in order to qualify as higher distress. CDEs look at number of homes. If you're building 5 homes or you're building 20, they're probably going to look at the 20 more favorably, just because it's bigger impact for them to be able to report on. Higher percent of low-income people served, although if you have a mixed income strategy, that's certainly a really viable and good strategy depending on the locality. And then just strong outcomes. There are states that are considered underserved states because they received less allocation, or less was deployed to the projects in that state. That usually is something that people are interested in, because most CDs check the box and say they're gonna do that. And then other things to think about, 24-month look back. So if you have put a lot of money into the project already, we're going to want to hit that 24-month period so that you can use all of that to bring to the table as your leverage. So you have to raise less money. So always look at that kind of timing. Obviously, strength of the organization, track record generally is important. The story about the area is always important. The type of community outreach you do and aligning with specific community plans is relevant, and that's relevant to like application questions. Proximity to jobs, services, transportation, so the accessibility of the area you're building in is important. And then almost every CDE I know is looking for BIPOC clients or BIPOC leadership of your organization. And then there's a link there, which you will see if you want to submit a project, which could be for HPN, CHC, or for us to help you find a CDE. And I think.
Can you also put that link into the chat at some point, Donna?
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, well,
if not, I will provide it to you after.
We'll do it in a follow-up
Okay.
email if necessary.
Yeah, in fact, I think if you don't mind, I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to make sure I give you the right link, and that is not my area of expertise by any means. Okay, and then this is just what we do. We do this whether we're managing the CDE as well or not. If we're just working with the Qualic to help them find other CDs, we do this as well. So basically working with the developers to assemble all the due diligence required for closing, facilitating the transaction, and the closing being the clearinghouse for documents, And we also try and get all this as much collected as possible before any attorneys get on the phone for closing calls, because they're, it's probably $1,000 a minute or something if you get all those attorneys on the calls. So we try to wait until everything's as ready as it can be. We guarantee the recapture risk for nonprofit qualities. And manage the 7-year compliance, so helping with all the POB books, with the compliance reports. We have CPAs on staff who help setting up initial entries and all of that. We manage the expenses, the ongoing expenses, and we also actually backstop that account. So if there's not enough funds in it and you all didn't do some terrible bad act that caused it, it's our problem, not yours, and we'll just pay whatever those expenses are in the later years. And then direct loan servicing to make sure that compliance again continues. And at the end of the 7 years, we roll up the transaction for you. So, and that's that put option I was talking about, that basically it collapses the structure upon itself. So you end up being both the owner of the loan and the debtors, and being a nonprofit, you can forgive the debt and there's no consequence tax-wise. I think that's it. Oh, yeah, this is just, yep. And then just so you know, after this reference, we've got the glossary of terms, and then we also have the model that I referred to. And if anyone is interested, please reach out. I'm happy to, walk them through it.
Thanks, Donna.
Yep.
Let's see, I was going to say, oh, Donna, there are a couple of just really technical questions that I think you could answer in the chat as we move on
Oh,
with the
sure.
presentation.
Okay.
So feel free to do that, or in the Q&A. So I also, the one thing that you said to me once that I thought was really fascinating is that, as complicated as all of this sounds, you have worked with some very small organizations with very few staff. So tell us, what's the smallest group you worked with?
Well, okay, so this was many years ago, and it was a Habitat affiliate in almost heaven. I think it was in rural West Virginia. And I think there was an ED, and I think she might have had a finance person.
And yet she was able to pull off a
And a
multi-million-dollar
PO box. Yes. No
box.
office. But yes. But I feel like that was sort of different times, but it was a long time ago. But I mean, but we've worked, yeah. You can be small, but your project has to be big enough to make it worth your while.
So don't count yourselves out immediately just on how complicated this sounds right now. That's why every group probably starts out with an organization like Donna's to help deal with everything all the way through the project. So let's move on to our next Donna Van Ness, who is the director of Housing Channel, and she's going to talk to us about a specific project that she has used New Market Tax Credits for. So go ahead, Donna. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and appreciate this opportunity. The first slide, I just kind of want to give you a background about our organization. We're a designated CHODO, which is a community housing development organization. And basically, we've been around for 32 years, and our strategy has always been accessing federal programs such as HOME and CDBG to leverage that public and private financing to fill the gap between the cost of construction and the affordability to 80% of area median income buyers. And I always like to start with this picture here in the corner, because back in 2003, so 20 years ago almost, this is how we were building, very large 2-story, 1,800 square feet homes, in a big 50 by 100 lot. But then, of course, COVID hit, and oh my God, our prices in our market went crazy here. And so we were faced with the fact that the home dollars, we needed deeper and deeper subsidies, and we were helping fewer and fewer people. So how are we going to respond to this market? Next slide. So one of the ways that we were looking at was creating a medium density project, moving towards single family attached townhomes was one of the ways that we could create that affordability by creating more units on the same piece of land. The other thing that we were dealing with this particular project was it was about a block from our General Motors assembly plant in Arlington, Texas. And they were putting in about $4 billion into new infrastructure. And so the mayor at the time was like, oh my God, we need to address, housing affordability, and we need revitalization, because the community surrounding this area was the highest poverty level. It was a target area for the city, highest crime, lowest education scores. It was an area in dire need of resources and revitalization. So how do you do that? How do you address that issue? And one of the, things with home and CDBG is that, you're capped at 80%. So our idea was, how about, we try to create a mixed neighborhood, bring in higher incomes as well as serving that affordability. So this New Markets was just really an answer to a prayer. And being a member of Housing Partnership Network, we were able to apply for New Markets, and were luckily awarded, I believe, in 2018 for this particular project. And so how it came about is, it was about 4 acres of land, and the city really wanted us to do mixed income as well as mixed use. So about, 3 acres of it we were dedicating to, the residential portion. And our target was to serve 80% up to 120% of area median income. And just to give you an idea, in our area, 80% household limit is about $76,000 for a household of 4, and up to 120, it's $113,650 for 120. So you get a great mix of different incomes that help elevate and revitalize a community. So with New Markets, the benefits obviously is that it was a qualified census tract, which actually eliminated it from some of the other programs like LIHTC and some other programs that require that you go to a high opportunity area. So this was a great opportunity for us to work in a qualified census tract and bring in higher incomes as well as create affordability with one project. Because you really need to try to have that mixed income for, that revitalization. The other thing, obviously, we were interested in a home ownership product and not rental. And then, as Donna alluded to, that subsidy that's provided by the higher market or the higher priced homes helps subsidize the lower priced homes. So there are a lot of really good benefits from the New Markets and incorporating that into our project. The other thing it provided is, because it was a qualified census tract, lenders were interested in offering down payment assistance to all buyers. So you didn't have to qualify at 80% to get the down payment assistance. Lenders were obviously getting CRA benefit by providing mortgage loans for those particular homes in this QTC. So what that did was entice people at 120% AMI who may not normally look in this lower income neighborhood as an opportunity to have instant equity. So they were very interested in buying here, and it motivated them versus going, obviously they had opportunities to buy in other locations as well. The other thing that it helped us do is that we petitioned the city to create a neighborhood empowerment zone, or a NEZ. And that helped us offset a lot of our construction permits and fees. We got a lot of waivers for those, which saved us about $250,000. So that was another thing that helped with this project. The city provided down payment assistance to our 80% buyers at $20,000, and that was through a home program. And then through the New Markets tax subsidy, we were also able to offer another $25,000 in down payment assistance for home buyers. And if you go to the next slide, so we actually did build it. I'm so happy. You wonder sometimes, you have this great vision, but we were able to accomplish it. And it was I'll tell you, the board of directors, they were, we were concerned because, again, this was an area that had, sufficient crime. It was, a lot of, it was the highest poverty rate. So we weren't sure if it was going to work. And we're so glad we sold quicker, and we completed the project quicker than what we thought. I think a lot of things helped, obviously, incorporating, working with the community and the neighborhoods to feel a part of the project was a huge benefit, because they really took ownership of this project and helped us combat some of the issues that you encounter when you work in, lower income communities. So, everything from picking out the colors and the style of the way that the homes looked really make them feel a part of the project, and help us with, a lot of things along the way through the project. And through the new markets, we were able to get probably about $1 million in subsidy from the new markets program, but then also layer in some other home dollars, as I mentioned, through DPA, some of the other DPA through lenders, and the NES really created a really affordable project. And it's one of those projects that really is a marketable thing for the city. The city uses this project on a lot of their presentations and things to show how one project can really have a great impact and significant impact on its surrounding community. The other thing I want to mention, a lot of developers in my space, we have to combat NIMBYs, not in my backyard. When you do a mixed income project, you call it a mixed income project versus an affordable project. And we got no pushback, which is the first time in our 30-year history that we didn't get some kind of opposition to building. So that was another great benefit. I think it opened us up to a broader audience who understands more of what we're trying to do with the community, and not pigeonhole it into the fact that it was, affordable, which, to a lot of people, unfortunately, is a negative thing. If you go to the next slide, I just want to mention that, so this project is about a mile from the new Texas Rangers Globe Life Field. It's a mile from the world famous Dallas Cowboys Stadium. So it's really benefited a lot of not only the General Motors plant employees, but employees that work in concessions and other areas of the entertainment district. And we're hoping to do more to help out that employment base as well. If you want to go to the next slide. So coming off a successful run with new markets, we thought we would try it again since we learned more. And Donna's group is great. Let me just say, I know it looks very complicated and there's a lot of acronyms, but her and her team really handhold you through the whole process. So we felt very comfortable in taking it on because, we didn't have the balance sheet to pay for that initial investment up front. We did get a loan, but with her help and her team's help, we managed to pay that loan off early, and actually it helped us with the next project and being able to get another investment loan. So this particular project was a little different, a little smaller. It's 12 units. Again, a mixed income. But what was great about this project is the city of Irving was debuting a new mixed use category in their downtown historic district. Again, it's an area of town that's been left behind in the market. It was the oldest community in the city of Irving. And the city really wanted to try to lift it up, to elevate it, to bring in new types of projects with the mixed use category, but they also wanted to provide affordability and a mixed income. So there's a lot of things, a lot of goals and a big vision for this particular project. So what we were able to accomplish is residential, affordable residential, but also created a live-work product. Which helped, make it eligible for that mixed use category. And it turned out incredible. The project the land was owned by the city. So we purchased the land from the city. And then we built, which was previously held, I think it had single family homes on it before, I think 4. And then we demoed that and created 12 units of affordable housing. Again, it was 80 to 120% AMI. We had 4 live work units, which made it eligible for the mixed use. And so the buyers, the homeowner was the occupant of the downstairs open space or workspace, and they lived in the second and the third floor. So we have like a salon, I think a tax attorney, someone who sells cake supplies. So they have their business downstairs and they live in the second and the third floor. So we were able to leverage the New Markets tax credit to help subsidize the construction, and the city came in with $50,000 of down payment assistance for the people, for the homeowners that purchased at 80% area median income. So you go to the next slide, you can see this is it. So we're very excited about this project. Live Work has been something that we've not done before. And I think New Markets really helped us again with providing a price that was appealing to a broader market that would come into an area that is, you know, predominantly underserved, it's lower income area, and create that revitalization of that neighborhood that the city was desperately seeking. So if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of give you a home buyer profile just to kind of talk dollars and cents. So our construction costs, you know, for the units averaged about $325. And so our sales price to our 80% buyers were $259. But they got $50,000 in down payment assistance. Plus we layered another $15,000 from the Federal Home Loan Bank. So they got, you know, $65,000 in down payment assistance, which really helped them with a lower priced mortgage. We also were able to get a lender partner to give us a 4% interest portfolio loan for our 80% buyers. So they really got a great deal. So this tells you this little family here, their loan was just under $200,000. Their income was under $77,900. And then with the HOA, taxes, mortgage, and insurance, their payment was about $1,978, which was about 32% of their income, which was very sustainable. We feel we try to stay under 35% on the ratio for the housing. We also provide ongoing homebuyer education and all of those types of things to help ensure that our homeowners are sustainable. So that was just a quick, you know, overview of the projects. My contact information is on this next slide. I'm more than happy to talk all things New Markets. It really was a game changer for our organization. As I mentioned, the compliance and the complexity is really is not bad because of Donna's team. I mean, she has a full team that helps you with accounting, financials. They worked with our auditor. So, I mean, you don't feel like you need to add, you know, additional staff to try to manage it, because she really has that all in-house for you, so that you're up to date on what you have to report, all the compliance. So it's been, I wouldn't say an easy process, because anything new is you know, there's a learning curve, but it was a really great project. And anybody that's used government funding like HOME or CDBG, you know, you're used to compliance. So it is so much less than that. And it was really a great way to accomplish affordability and revitalization in communities that really needed the help. And that was, I believe, what it's really intended to do. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Donna. And that's so interesting. I don't think I realized that you had the Live Work project there. That's so intriguing, and it opens up all kinds of, you know, possibilities in my head. I really like that. So our next speaker, our last speaker, is Jeff Hasser, Director of Housing Strategy for Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. Jeff, you may remember, has an example of scattered site, which includes, I think, some rehab, ACK rehab, as well as new construction. So Jeff, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So good afternoon. I am Jeff Hasser. They actually requested me to be here just to prove that someone not named Donna is allowed to use new market tax.
That was it.
That's really my big benefit. Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership, we are a nonprofit. We're a community development financial institution, including a community-based development organization. We've been serving Indianapolis for over 35 years. My role at INHP is primarily deals with the development of homeownership opportunities through the creation of new homes. But formerly, I worked for both the state of Indiana and the city of Indianapolis with the low-income housing tax credits, CDBG and home programs. And then eventually, I was overseeing our real estate and economic development teams for the city, which included the city's new market tax credits team as well. So I've seen a little bit from both sides. I don't ever claim to be an expert, but I've at least have some experience in that. And you know, one of the things I really jumped out to me was Donna's comments relating to LIHTC knowledge that really didn't service me in understanding new market tax credits nearly as much. So that was one thing I wanted to put a fine emphasis on. They're definitely different beasts. Next slide, please. So to give you a small overview of INHB, our roots are in homebuyer education advising, but we have expanded beyond that over the last 35 years. So we also provide things like down payment assistance, home repair loans, single family development, which will obviously be the topic for today, land banking, community lending, and some limited grant making. So the main reason I bring that up is just to be able to show the wide breadth with which INHB actually provides services and how we were able to kind of combine some of these together to be able to make our projects work and develop quality homes. Next slide. So HPN was our first experience with new market tax credits. We started back in 2017 with HPN and Smith. And then we were thankful enough to be invited back for a separate transaction in 2001. For these transactions, the projects were single family scattered site. This is probably one of the few instances where we actually had 3 homes next to each other. But overall, most of them were not necessarily close to each other, all within qualified census tracts, but across all of Center Township within Indianapolis. About 2/3 of those were at or below 80% of the area median income. We actually talked about this briefly before, we actually deferred to the neighborhoods in terms of whether they would want 80% or 120% AMI. Most of the neighborhoods selected 80%. However, we did have a few neighborhoods that were interested in more of the middle income options for their neighborhoods. And thankfully, because of that breakdown, it actually worked out from a financial standpoint to be able to provide the requested subsidy for most of those. We have a strong CDC. Oh, if you can stay back for a second. We actually have a strong CDC network here in Indianapolis. So we partnered with a lot of local CDCs to identify the properties and acted as the developer for those sites, while INHB remained the owner. Due to the ease, I echo Donna's comments as well, due to the ease of deploying new market tax credit funds compared to CDBG or home, our CDC partners actually loved working with us and would routinely ask for more new market tax credit opportunities even after we ran out of funds. My own internal staff person is always asking, hey, why don't you have more new market tax credit funds? And I unfortunately, it's not always possible to just have an endless supply of them. But INHB, for these projects, we were focused on tipping point neighborhoods, where we use data to identify opportunity neighborhoods of where to invest in affordable housing. Before, we were competing with market developers, but we could still assist in the revitalization of the area. This strategy shifted, I would say, over the last few years to preservation of affordable housing. As the market has become more robust, the availability of affordable properties has decreased. Land used to never be an issue here in Indianapolis, and now it's become scarcer and scarcer. But the new market tax credits were the primary subsidy source that we used for these homes. However, we were able to combine some of our CDBG and home financing tools So we have a CDBG loan product, and we had a home down payment assistance that we could use to actually make some of these homes affordable on the buyer side, as opposed to the development side where we traditionally used our new market tax credits. Next slide, please. So in 2022, the city of Indianapolis's Indy CDE, which is their own CDE, was fortunate enough to receive an allocation of new market tax credit funds, of which INHB was a recipient of $8 million of these funds. A little unique from the HBN transactions, as we actually had the relationship with the city of Indianapolis and with the Indy CDE. And then once we were allocated the funds, we actually brought in Smith to assist us on that project. I think it was very beneficial both for us to have continue to have Smith helping us through this process, but I also think it was incredibly helpful to the Indy CDE, who had never done a housing or home ownership project through new market tax credits. So I think being able to have an experienced partner like Smith to be able to walk through kind of the process and the education. Now we're hopeful that if there is a future new market tax credit transaction to the Indy CDE, we can actually have laid the groundwork where they could be more comfortable funding future projects that we might have. The project site here is within a historically majority, minority, and low income neighborhood. But it is seeing the pressures of the market increase that is happening all around. So really seeing a lot of new homes being built that are not affordable at all for most of the historic residents of this area. The site was a former brownfield that the city was able to remediate, along with a very popular trail system here in Indianapolis called the Monon Trail. The original project scope was 22 units. But we worked with the developer to increase the total number of townhomes to be 33. So we kind of made that determination. We can find the additional funds for the 33, but we're going to work really hard, even though, based on the new market tax credit transaction, our goal was really only 22. We're really trying to exceed that. At the request of the neighborhood, over 51% of the homes will be affordable to households at or below 80% AMI. So a little different from the other neighborhoods, in that there was a specific request of not 100% affordable, for this project. Next slide, please. So Arnold Place is the name of the project. Here are some renderings of the townhomes that will be available. Apparently, townhomes are a very popular tool with new market tax credits. But this will be INHB's largest single site majority affordable home ownership project. And it will be the largest one within Indianapolis in over 20 years. So I think we're very proud and excited about what we're eventually developing here, but still a long ways to go. Next slide, please. So Arnold Place subsidy layering was again very different from our previous two new market tax credit transactions. New market tax credits really only makes up about 19% of our total subsidy layering for the project. We really had to get creative and very fortunate with a lot of the timing of some of these grant funds to be able to include them within and fit within the project. The biggest one being ARPA funding from the city. That was a huge benefit to be able to incorporate in this. So them as a continued partner was able to invest in it. But a lot of these we're still working on how do we increase the affordability that we can do. We're never going to get to 100%. But how do we make sure we're exceeding that for this opportunity as much as possible? Next slide, please. As of the end of 2023, we have had INHB has had over 90 homes completed since 2017. The majority of which were completed with new market tax credits from our first two HBN new market tax credit transactions. We have over 40 under construction, with the bulk of those being the Arnold Place project funded with the Indy CDE. However, we're always trying to keep a pipeline of future project sites that are in some stage of preliminary planning for two reasons. The first is we want to be prepared for any future allocations that may become available, so we can have projects ready to insert into a transaction. As Donna made note, project readiness is a big key. I always think every funder wants to be the last one in. I feel that even more so with new market tax credits. They very much want to see something ready to go and potentially even have costs incurred, a significant cost incurred that can just be rolled into that. So A lot of that is we're trying to have that so we can be competitive for future applications. And the second, which I think a lot of people have seen it, have made comments or questions in the chat. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this, is we want to be compliant with our previous new market tax credit allocations. So we want a steady stream of compliance homes through the 7 years. So keep in mind the new market tax credit funds, as I always think of it, the funds are essentially funding us as a business. So INHP is the business that is receiving those new market tax credit funds in order to be an active home builder over those 7 years, working on at least one home each year. So every year, Smith will send me an email, a very friendly email, but to say, hey, what is the next new property you're adding to, our previous HPN? And I have to say, okay, I have this address. They run it to make sure it's within a QTC. And I can say, hey, this is under development. We're showing that costs are flowing through our bank accounts associated with that previous new market tax credit calculation, even though, there is not necessarily anything to do with that. So in the case of Arnold Place, we will develop 33 homes on the site, but, we'll have 6 homes that essentially have nothing to do with Arnold Place from most of our funders or our perspectives. Outside of that, they both have that new market tax credit bank account where all those costs are flowing through. So I'm usually either finding other subsidy sources for these compliance homes, but I also try to reserve some of the original subsidy generated from the transaction, just in case I need that to offset those additional expenses. Theoretically, we could buy an existing home. If we break in case of emergency, we could buy an existing home that needs some work. We could put money into it, improve it, and then resell it, even potentially at market rate, depending on my percentage of overall homes that I have completed below 80% AMI. So you might remember previously we talked about that 20% rule. We have historically exceeded that by quite a bit. So if we have to do a market rate or 120% AMI, we can in those cases. So I think that's the end of my slides.
Thank you, Jeff. That's really interesting. And I can see how important it is that that if you're going to do a new market tax credit, that you are a real estate developer in terms of, even if it's a nonprofit real estate developer, that you have an ongoing concern about this so that you can continue to have things in the pipeline to meet that requirement. We've answered a lot of questions. When I say we, it's mostly Donna Smith in the Q&A and in the chat. And so I encourage you to check the answered questions. And then we have a new one that Jesse just put in there. Is there a way to see how many new market tax credit projects, we're about getting that answered, have been funded by state by state? Jesse lives and works in Arizona. So let's see, what was the answer to that? There is on a general level. Okay, so Donna can look into that.
Yeah, through the CDFI fund, you can get like the general deployed in each state. And then if you want to know housing, we have our numbers, which is the majority of what's been done. And then we have fairly up-to-date Habitat for Humanity International numbers as well, because we're in a coalition together on new markets and for sale housing. So I mean, we can check with them to get a feel for what theirs are like as well, state by state.
And I didn't see the response to the question, although I think you answered it. Donna, you are not the only firm that does what you do, right?
So there are other new markets consultants. We are the only firm that specializes in for sale housing. And I believe there are a few consultants who have done, maybe a deal or two, I think.
And I think I understood you to say that you work in 2 kinds of relationships. You are contracted by NeighborWorks America's CDFI that is a recipient
CHC,
from Treasury.
Community Housing Capital and
Uh-huh.
Housing Partnership Network.
To support their work, but
We
then
partner with them, and then
But
we also, yes, or the nonprofits can also come to us if they want to see, source allocation from other CDEs, and we work with them to do that. Marcia?
Looks like she froze up.
I know. I think Marcia's frozen.
I do see some questions in the chat as well.
Thanks, Jeff.
Used for,
Sorry,
there-
You froze a bit,
You were
sorry.
frozen for a while, Marcia.
oh, was I? Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, I guess it wasn't you that froze, it was me. Why do you think that only 2% of new market tax credits so far have been used for sale housing as opposed to business development? Is that what the vast majority is used for?
Well, community services is a high one too. So like, urbanly built headquarters or other, or early childhood buildings or whatever. And we work with those folks as well, but that's not the biggest part of what we do. But really it's because until we sort of came up with the idea and pitched it to Habitat for Humanity International in 2007 and said, we'll form a CDE with you, we'll run it, etc. Then people weren't using it for sale housing, even though it says in the statute, like it literally says housing, it's in there. But it's a little different. I don't know if it's harder. I think people think it's harder because, there's a lot of bankers in the industry, right? And I think they're used to like, here's what we do, here's the structure, here's what it funds, those are the rules. And it's very much because of the timing and everything else and the way that the program is run and how competitive it is. I think that a lot of the CDEs and investors want to do the sort of the low-hanging fruit, the stuff they know that they can get it out, they can talk about the impact and they get more, which we all get that. And so I think it's a combination of things like that so that they were scared of housing, and part of, I think what scared them is that if the collateral on that loan goes down to the actual homes, then it's a little riskier, right? Because what if there's a sale, refinance, or foreclosure, right? Within those 7 years, plus you're limiting your home buyers as to what their own flexibility of their own asset, right? So we actually developed an alternative collateral package so that it doesn't go down to the level of the home. And I think that's something that both is actually in our mind makes it less risky, but I think it's scary to lenders that are used to like standard collateral packages. So I think some of it is that, but we're always working on having more. And through NCST, there's actually a New Markets Tax Credit Homeownership Alliance working group that is trying to increase the use of new markets for sale housing. So.
Well, that's really great. There are a few more questions in the Q&A now. Scott asks, I think we've answered this before, but maybe.
I did, yeah, but here, I'll just answer it out loud. Be faster than typing it, right?
The question is, do you need to identify all properties that you'll develop or renovate at the initial closing, or can you add properties over time?
You can add properties, and a lot of times people don't even have their full list. We just need at least census tracts. So we need some address, some idea that it's going to qualify. And then you can add them.
Donna, the one thing I would add in is in my experience, the more you have, the more competitive or the more likely a CDE is probably to be interested in funding you.
Yeah.
We've had some proposals that we will say that are identified, and even with our track record that we have, sometimes they have been not as interested in exploring funding with us, which is okay. But it definitely, the more you can have, the more competitive I think you'll
Agree.
be.
Yeah, because it's impact, and unfortunately sometimes they just look at numbers instead of thinking about the impact for a community. Yeah. There's a question on, are there many CDEs passing tax credits or loan funds to smaller CDEs with the leverage model? So that is a great question, because there's been all this talk about like bringing in smaller CDEs and CDs that are run by people of color, and ways to do that would be to do exactly what you're asking, Adam. And I've actually suggested that in various like LinkedIn comments, and I get ignored. So I think we should push for that, because that's how you can get smaller CDEs, and especially, BIPOC-led CDEs active and able to participate more. So the answer is no, but there should be.
That's a really great point. I hope everybody will keep pushing for that. I think that there are barriers to BIPOC organizations or BIPOC neighborhoods who were, they're discouraged from having CDCs in some cases for so many years that they don't have the infrastructure in their white counterpart neighborhoods. And we really need to make people more aware of those differences and come up with the solutions that would make this kind of project funding more available. Let's see, I don't see any other questions here. I guess we're only 5 minutes out from our close time, but I guess I would like to ask just Jeff and Donna Van Ness to say one more thing about than they have already about why you prefer or what are the benefits of new market tax credits over other funding sources, perhaps? And is the scale of the funding bigger generally than you get from, say, CDBG or home?
Well, the scale is different, I'll say, because you could get home allocations, for $1 million or $2 million. But what's hard about federal dollars is it's all reimbursement based. So you're constantly having to deal with that process. Whereas new markets, it's in the bank at closing. So that is very helpful, especially for developers that are, combating all kinds of cash in and out. So I think that is a huge benefit for the New Markets Tax Credit Program.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in this day and age, I think everyone's looking for how they can get the most bang for their buck. And with the new market tax credits, again, we previously, back in 2017-18, the new market tax credits could provide the subsidy all on their own, just because of building costs, interest rates, etc. We're just no longer that case anymore. So, things like CDBG, home, ARPA, Federal Home Loan Banks, AHP funds, all those, we're exploring everything on how we can layer it together to be able to combine. But, part of it is almost a shame because new market tax credits can be so easy to deploy that then you kind of muck it up with the federal funds. But I have never experienced an instance where I felt like the new market tax credits made it harder. If we were hitting those goals or those requirements for the federal funds, usually we had almost all the information that we would need for the new market tax credit compliance.
Got it. That's really interesting. I think, Ed Loggins, that we answered the question about multifamily projects earlier, which is that they can be set up as condos or co-ops, any ownership structure in a multifamily setting, but it still does have to be ownership based. I don't know. I assume mutual housing is not ownership-y enough. Is that correct, Donna?
I think it would depend on how the ownership reads, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
now this is the recovering attorney in me, but like I would want to see the documents before.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I haven't heard. I mean, if it worked, you probably would have clients in Vermont. I think that's where I most of the time
Oh,
hear,
really?
yeah, that kind of ownership model. So I think my partner Anne is going to pull up some closing slides for us. There we go. Just want to let you know that on April 17th, we have our engagement chat, which is going to be focused on getting money for events and volunteer management software as well. This is a thing that we do for those people in our community practice who are especially focused on community engagement. we don't know what our next month webinar is going to be yet. So we're not going to talk about it, but there will be one. And do please email us always if you have ideas for webinars, case studies, news stories that you'd like to see us do. We're always really interested in having your ideas on that. And there will be space for you also to jot down those ideas in the evaluation after this webinar. Our partner, Center for Community Progress, does a good webinar series called Cornerstone Webinar Series, so we like to promote that as well. And finally, please do join our community of practice. You can just go to ncst.org/middle neighborhoods, middle-neighborhoods, I guess. That must be, I didn't even realize that.
Uh-oh, Marcia froze again.
Rose again.
That's okay. We're wrapping it up. So yeah, so anybody who's interested in joining the Middle Neighborhoods Community of Practice can just go to this website here and join that way. We will be sending out the recording for this webinar in the next day or so, along with all the slides. So thank you so much, Donna and Jeff. Thanks
Thanks.
everyone for being here.
Thanks.
Bye, thanks.
Great.